You're too old for this fight, Harold. Margaret once teased, a retired colonel chasing peace in a new town, not guessing one rejection would spark chaos. That crisp noon, he faced a smug clerk's dismissal at the club, his steady hand hiding a plan already brewing. Months later, armed men in dark suits stormed his quiet street, their presence a grim echo of battles long past. Hello everyone. Welcome to Narrative Whispers. Today I'm going to tell you another heartwarming story, so let's dive into it. The crisp autumn air carried a hint of wood smoke as Harold Anderson made his way up the cobblestone path leading to Willow Creek Country Club. His polished leather shoes crunched on fallen leaves, and he adjusted his tie, a small ritual that had always calmed his nerves. At 72, Harold still maintained the military posture that had defined him for decades, though few in town knew of his service. The grand colonial building loomed ahead, its white columns gleaming in the afternoon sun. Harold had rehearsed this moment countless times in his mind, imagining the warmth of acceptance, the pleasant introductions, the sense of belonging. What he couldn't have prepared for was the subtle shift in the receptionist's smile when she noticed the birth date on his application. Mr. Anderson, she began, her voice honeyed yet distant. Thank you for your interest in our establishment. I've reviewed your application with the membership committee. She paused, sliding an envelope across the mahogany desk. While your credentials are certainly impressive, I'm afraid we're unable to extend membership at this time. The club is experiencing certain demographic adjustments to maintain our vibrant community atmosphere. Harold's expression remained impassive, a skill honed through years of negotiations and difficult conversations. I see, he replied, his voice steady despite the disappointment settling in his chest. Might I ask for clarification on these demographic adjustments? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. The receptionist's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. We're simply working to maintain a balanced membership that reflects the dynamic future of Willow Creek. I'm sure you understand. Her voice lowered slightly. Perhaps the senior center downtown offers activities more suited to your interests and energy levels. The walk home felt longer than usual, each step weighted with rejection. Harold had moved to Willow Creek 3 years ago after his wife Margaret passed away, seeking a fresh start in the picturesque town where they'd once vacationed. The country club had seemed like the perfect place to build new connections, to feel part of something again. Now, as he passed the clubhouse with its laughter spilling from open windows, he noticed what he'd somehow missed before. The conspicuous absence of gray hair among the members lounging on the veranda or teeing off on the first hole. That evening, as Harold sat on his porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold, his neighbor Ellie Jacobson waved from her garden. Any luck with the country club application? She called, setting down her pruning shears and making her way to the white picket fence that separated their properties. At 68, Ellie had the energy of someone decades younger, her silver bob always perfectly styled, her eyes bright with curiosity. Not quite, Harold replied, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. Apparently, I'm not part of the vibrant community atmosphere they're cultivating. He couldn't keep the edge from his voice as he recounted the conversation, watching Ellie's expression shift from surprise to indignation. Ellie sank into the chair with a heavy sigh. You too, huh? They turned down Robert from Maple Street last month. He's only 65. And Catherine Williams was practically told they weren't interested in her kind when she inquired. She shook her head, lips pressed into a thin line. It's becoming quite the pattern, though nobody seems willing to call it what it is. And what's that? Harold asked, though the answer was already crystallizing in his mind. Age discrimination, plain and simple. Ellie replied, her voice low but fierce. That club has been systematically pushing out older members and rejecting new applicants over 60 for the past 2 years. The new management seems to think gray hair is bad for business. She reached for his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. I'm sorry, Harold. You deserved better than that form letter rejection. Sleep eluded Harold that night as he replayed the receptionist's words in his mind. Demographic adjustments echoed in the darkness of his bedroom, along with Ellie's more direct accusation. It wasn't just about his rejected application anymore. It was about a community that valued youth over experience, that pushed aside its seniors as if they were obsolete. Harold had never been one to accept injustice quietly. Not during his military career, not during his years as a financial strategist, and certainly not now in what should have been his golden years. Morning found Harold at his desk, surrounded by documents he hadn't looked at in years, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose as he reviewed financial statements, property records, and business licenses. The Willow Creek Country Club had been a fixture in the community for over 50 years. But like many established institutions, it had weathered financial storms. Harold's research revealed what he suspected. The club had taken out a significant mortgage during the recession to renovate its facilities, a debt that now hung over the organization's future. This is where experience counts for something, Harold murmured to himself, picking up the phone and dialing an old colleague from his days in finance. Charles? It's Harold Anderson. I need some information about a property acquisition here in Willow Creek. 3 weeks later, Harold stood in the mahogany-paneled conference room of Silverton Bank, signing the final papers that would transfer ownership of the Willow Creek Country Club's mortgage to his investment company. The bank manager, a young man with an expensive haircut and a nervous smile, slid the documents across the table. Are you sure about this, Mr. Anderson? The club's financial situation isn't exactly stellar. Harold signed his name with a flourish, the pen gliding across the paper with certainty. I believe in making sound investments in the community, Mr. Reynolds. Sometimes value isn't immediately apparent on a balance sheet. He closed the portfolio and extended his hand. It's been a pleasure doing business with you. The annual board meeting of Willow Creek Country Club was scheduled for the first Tuesday in October, traditionally a formality where the same policies were reaffirmed and the same board members re-elected year after year. Harold arrived early, dressed in his best charcoal suit, and took a seat at the back of the room. One by one, the members filed in, most ignoring the unfamiliar face in their midst. The club president, Richard Garrett, a man in his 40s with a perpetual tan and 2 white teeth, called the meeting to order with a perfunctory rap of his gavel. Before we proceed with our standard agenda, Harold spoke up, rising from his seat with the assurance of someone who belonged there. I'd like to address the board as a representative of Anderson Financial Group, the current holder of this establishment's mortgage. The silence that fell over the room was immediate and absolute. Harold could practically hear the collective intake of breath as he made his way to the front, nodding politely to Richard Garrett, whose smile had frozen in place. Mr. Anderson, Garrett began, attempting to regain control of the situation. This is a private meeting for board members and club officials only. While we appreciate your interest in our financial matters, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to. I believe your bylaws state that any entity with a significant financial stake in the club is entitled to representation at board meetings. Harold interrupted smoothly, placing a leather portfolio on the table. As the holder of your $3.2 million mortgage, I think that qualifies as significant, wouldn't you agree? The meeting that followed was unlike any in the club's recent history. Harold presented a comprehensive analysis of the club's financial trajectory, declining membership, increasing operational costs, and a troubling pattern of short-sighted decision-making that prioritized immediate profits over long-term sustainability. His delivery was methodical, his tone respectful yet unflinching. Gentlemen, ladies, he concluded, looking each board member in the eye. Your current strategy is not just morally questionable, it's financially unsound. Richard Garrett's face had progressed from shock to flushed with anger. Now wait just a minute, he sputtered, rising to his feet. Who do you think you are, coming in here and lecturing us about our business model? This club has operated successfully for decades. Harold's response was measured, his voice steady. I'm someone who recognizes that experience has value, Mr. Garrett, something this club seems to have forgotten. He opened his portfolio again, extracting a bound document. I've prepared a proposal for restructuring, both financially and philosophically. I believe it addresses the concerns of all stakeholders, including those you've been systematically excluding. The proposal was, in Harold's estimation, a masterpiece of strategic planning. It outlined a comprehensive renovation of the club's facilities to include amenities that would appeal to members of all ages. It detailed a new membership structure that would actually increase revenue, while ensuring diversity across age groups. Most importantly, it established a clear path to financial stability that would secure the club's future for generations to come. This is absurd, Garrett protested, though with noticeably less conviction. We can't simply overhaul our entire operation based on the whims of your mortgage holder? Harold supplied calmly. Perhaps not, but you should consider that if the club defaults on its loan, which, according to my projections, is likely within 18 months if you continue your current course, My company would be well within its rights to foreclose and implement these changes anyway. He paused, allowing the implication to sink in. I'd prefer we work together, however. Experience has taught me that collaboration typically yields better results than confrontation. The boardroom erupted into heated discussions as copies of Harold's proposal circulated among the members. Some faces reflected outrage, others calculation, and a few, particularly among the older members who had managed to retain their positions, showed something that looked suspiciously like hope. Harold stood quietly, hands clasped behind his back, as the future of the Willow Creek Country Club hung in the balance. Over the following weeks, Harold became a fixture at the club, meeting with individual board members, listening to concerns, and refining his proposal. The opposition, led by Richard Garrett, gradually dwindled as the financial reality became impossible to ignore. Harold's plan wasn't just a moral stance. It was a lifeline for an institution treading water in a changing economy. "You know, Anderson," said James Wilson, the club's treasurer and one of the few board members over 60, as they shared a drink on the veranda one evening. "When you first showed up at that meeting, I thought you were just another corporate raider looking to flip the property for a quick profit." He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, ice cubes clinking softly. "I'm glad I was wrong," Harold smiled, watching the sunset paint the golf course in golden light. "I've learned that the most valuable investments aren't always about immediate returns, James. Sometimes they're about setting things right." Wilson nodded thoughtfully. "Well, you've certainly stirred things up around here. Garrett and his cronies are running scared, especially after that community survey you commissioned showed overwhelming support for your inclusive approach." He chuckled softly. "Did you see his face when the results came in?" "Priceless. Change is rarely comfortable," Harold replied, "particularly for those who've benefited from the status quo." He took a sip of his drink, the warmth spreading through his chest. "But it's necessary. This club belongs to the entire community, not just those born after 1980. The vote, when it finally came, wasn't even close. Harold's proposal passed with overwhelming support, driven by a coalition of forward-thinking younger members and the remaining older contingent who had felt increasingly marginalized. Richard Garrett resigned his position the following day, citing philosophical differences with the club's new direction. In his place, the board elected James Wilson as interim president, with Harold serving as special advisor during the transition period. The transformation of Willow Creek Country Club began almost immediately. The renovation plans emphasized accessibility alongside luxury, creating spaces where members of all ages could enjoy the facilities. The membership committee, now led by Ellie Jacobson, whose application had been expedited with Harold's quiet encouragement, instituted new policies explicitly prohibiting age discrimination and actively recruiting diverse members from throughout the community. "You've done something remarkable here," Ellie told Harold as they toured the construction site 6 months later, hard hats perched somewhat incongruously atop their gray hair. "This isn't just about a country club anymore. It's about dignity and respect for everyone, regardless of age." Harold shrugged, though the pride in his eyes belied his modest gesture. "I simply pointed out what should have been obvious all along, that experience has value, that communities thrive when they embrace diversity in all its forms, including age." "Well, obvious or not, you've changed things for the better," Ellie insisted, pausing to examine the blueprints for the new multi-generational recreation center. "Though I still can't figure out how you managed to buy the mortgage so quickly. Even with your financial background, that was quite a feat." Harold smiled enigmatically. "Let's just say I had resources that weren't immediately apparent to Mr. Garrett and his friends." The grand reopening of Willow Creek Country Club was scheduled for Memorial Day weekend, a fitting tribute to new beginnings. The renovations had transformed the property into a showpiece of inclusive luxury, with facilities that accommodated members from toddlers to nonagenarians. The celebration drew hundreds from across the community, including many who had never before felt welcome within the club's exclusive boundaries. James Wilson, now officially elected as president, stood at the podium on the newly constructed event lawn, the spring sunshine glinting off his silver hair. "Today marks not just the reopening of our facilities, but a recommitment to our core values of community, respect, and excellence," he announced to enthusiastic applause. "None of this would have been possible without the vision and determination of one man. A man who saw not just what was wrong with our institution, but how to make it right. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the stage the architect of our transformation, Mr. Harold Anderson." The applause swelled as Harold made his way to the podium, nodding in acknowledgement of the warm reception. He adjusted the microphone, scanning the diverse crowd gathered before him. Young families with children darting between chairs, middle-aged couples in summer attire, seniors seated comfortably in the shade. This was what community should look like, he thought with satisfaction. "Thank you for that kind introduction, James," Harold began, his voice strong despite his years. "But I don't stand before you as an architect of change so much as a reminder of something we too often forget. That wisdom accrues with time, that experience has value, that every stage of life brings its own unique perspective worth honoring." He paused, drawing a deep breath. "When I moved to Willow Creek 3 years ago after losing my wife of 45 years, I was seeking community, a place to belong, to contribute, to matter. What I found instead was a subtle but pervasive message that my time had passed, that my gray hair somehow diminished my worth." Murmurs of recognition rippled through the audience, particularly among the older attendees. "I could have accepted that rejection, retreated into isolation as too many of our seniors do," Harold continued. "Instead, I chose to use the skills I'd developed over a lifetime, skills in finance, in strategic planning, in building consensus, to create change, not just for myself, but for all of us who believe that community means embracing every member, regardless of age." A respectful hush had fallen over the gathering as Harold spoke. Even the children seemed to sense the importance of the moment, their usual restlessness temporarily stilled. "What you see around you today is the result of many hands working together toward a common goal. It's proof that when we value every voice, when we recognize that diversity includes age as well as other factors, we create something stronger and more vibrant than any exclusive enclave could ever be." As Harold's speech concluded to thunderous applause, a young reporter from the local newspaper approached the stage, notepad in hand. "Mr. Anderson," she called out, "the changes you've implemented here are impressive, but our readers are curious about your background. How does a retiree manage to purchase a multi-million-dollar mortgage and orchestrate such a comprehensive transformation?" A ripple of curiosity spread through the crowd. Despite his central role in the club's rebirth, Harold had remained somewhat enigmatic about his past. James Wilson stepped forward, placing a hand on Harold's shoulder. "I think it's time, Harold," he said quietly. "They should know who you really are." Harold hesitated, then nodded, turning back to the microphone. "I've never been one to dwell on the past," he began, his voice taking on a new dimension of authority. "But perhaps in this case, context matters. Before I retired to Willow Creek, I served for 30 years in the United States Army, retiring as a colonel in military intelligence. After that, I spent 15 years as a strategic financial advisor to several international corporations." A murmur of surprise swept through the audience. "But more relevant to today's celebration," Harold continued, "is the fact that my military service included 2 tours in Vietnam, where I was awarded the Silver Star for actions that saved the lives of 17 men in my unit during the Tet Offensive." The revelation landed like a thunderclap. James Wilson, seeing the stunned expressions, stepped to the microphone. "What Harold isn't telling you is that among those 17 men was Richard Garrett's father, who would not have lived to return home, marry, and eventually father our former club president." The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. That Richard Garrett, who had so adamantly opposed Harold's inclusion in the club, owed his very existence to the man he had rejected, added a layer of poetic justice to an already compelling narrative. The crowd's response was immediate and overwhelming. Applause transformed into a standing ovation that continued for several minutes. When Harold finally raised his hands to quiet the crowd, his eyes glistened with emotion. "I don't share this to claim special recognition or to embarrass anyone. The past is past. What matters is how we move forward, together, as a community that values each member for their unique contributions, regardless of their age or background." He gestured to the renovated clubhouse behind him, its doors open wide and welcome. Willow Creek Country Club now stands as a testament to what's possible when we reject artificial divisions and embrace the full spectrum of human experience. I'm proud to have played a part in that transformation, but the real work, the daily practice of inclusion and respect, belongs to all of us. As the ceremonial ribbon was cut, and the crowd surged forward to explore the new facilities, Harold found himself surrounded by well-wishers of all ages. Children tugged at his sleeves with questions about his military service, young professionals sought his advice on financial matters, and fellow seniors expressed heartfelt gratitude for his advocacy. In that moment, watching the diverse community flow around him, Harold felt a sense of completion he hadn't experienced since Margaret's passing. "Well, Colonel," Ellie said, appearing at his side with 2 glasses of champagne. "It seems you've won this campaign decisively." She handed him a glass, her eyes twinkling with admiration. "To new beginnings, and to the quiet determination that makes them possible." Harold raised his glass, clinking it gently against hers. "To new beginnings," he agreed. "And to communities that recognize that wisdom, like good wine, only improves with age." The laughter and conversation ebbed and flowed around them as the sun began its gentle descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the newly landscaped grounds of Willow Creek Country Club, a place transformed not by force or confrontation, but by the patient, persistent vision of one man who refused to accept that his time to make a difference had passed. Thank you for listening to this story. If you like it, please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next story of Narrative Whispers.